Hello, everyone. So we are back with another webinar today, and we've only got 2 out of our 3 speakers so far, but I'm sure that Daniel will join us in a bit. And if he doesn't, oh well, we're going to have a good time anyway. So I don't know about you, and Dixon was cutting it pretty fine, to be fair. I
Couldn't work out how the internet worked. I'm sorry about that,
I
Jojo.
know, goodness me, you just can't get the people. So I have seen a lot of talk lately about brand building and the growth of AI search. So understanding how to master brand authority in generative search has become a super hot topic. I think you'll agree. And I've got whoever turns up today to discuss it with, but I've got 2 out of 3 awesome guests, Chima and Dixon. So I'll introduce you guys properly in a sec, but before I do, my name is Jojo. Some of you know me, I'm the marketing manager at Sitebulb. It was far too hot to wear my Sitebulb t-shirt today, so you just have to content yourself with Sitebulb blue necklace and earrings. So Patrick, who is our co-founder and CEO, he's in the chat. Feel free to say hi to him. And obviously our guests too. Tell us where you are joining from. If you aren't familiar with Sitebulb, I'm just going to very quickly give you the lowdown. Sitebulb is a website auditing and crawling tool. In fact, we're the only crawler on the market to offer desktop-based software and a web-based cloud product. So that means our tool can help every SEO from solo freelancers all the way up to global enterprise brands. And Daniel's here. Woohoo! Sorry,
Everyone.
sorry to just address you directly, shame you. No, I'm just joking. So you can try our desktop crawler for free. It's loved for its user-friendly interface and in-depth reports. Just head to sitebulb.com/download for the free trial. Patrick should share that link in the chat. We've also got Sitebulb Cloud, which is the same tool, but accessible via your web browser. It is dramatically more affordable than other enterprise scale crawlers out there. So if you want to find out more about that or book a demo, head to sitebulb.com/cloud. Patrick will put the link in the chat. Okay, just a couple of bits of housekeeping, then we'll crack on. We are recording the webinar. I'll be sending the recording out tomorrow, so don't worry if you can't make it for the whole thing. We will have some time at the end of the webinar for your questions, so please put them in the Q&A tab, which is just next to the chat. Don't put them in the chat box itself. It's much easier having it in the Q&A tab. You can also upvote other people's questions in there. Okay, housekeeping is done. Let's get to our guests. So first up, last in, we've got Daniel Foley-Carter, probably the first SEO I ever followed on LinkedIn, an SEO evangelist since 1999, director of Assertive, founder of SEO Audits.io and SEO Stack. He's one of those SEOs that has done it so long, he's built his own tool to make the job easier. If you are not following him already, make sure you do. Next up, Chima Mmeje. I hope I said that right.
That's
I'm so
Mmeje.
sorry.
Mmeje. Yes.
Mmeje.
Yes.
Thank you, and sorry. A
That's
thousand
fine.
apologies.
That's
She's
fine.
senior content marketing manager at Moz and a super opinionated voice in the digital marketing community. She's an industry speaker, founder, and advocate for the freelance community for developing countries, and a highly respected content and SEO strategist. Last but not least, Dixon Jones, who was UK's Search Personality of the Year way back in 2012.
Yeah. I think I can give that one up now. It's a long time ago.
No, I dug that one out. Just for this intro. Dixon is a long-time friend of Sitebulb, and like Daniel, he's been doing SEO so long that he's moved into the SEO tool space and is CEO of both Inlinks and now WayK, which stands for What AI Knows About You. So that's our lead in. Welcome all. Thank you so much for joining us today. Right, let's get into the questions.
Thanks for having us, Jojo, by the way. And sorry I was late getting here, but you know.
You're fine. You're so fine. I was here like an hour early because I'm like that. So we're here to talk about brand and its importance in SEO. But has anything really changed since Eric Schmidt said in 2008 that brands were the solution to the internet cesspool? is brand building more important to SEOs now than it was in the era of traditional search? Daniel, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me on. And so, in terms of brand, I think, to be honest, brand equity has definitely become something that's of more value, especially since obviously AI is now the new norm and the buzzword, and now everyone is flocking to their thoughts and things that you should be doing to be cited and to appear in LLM-based queries. But I think it really goes beyond that. I think that there's quite a few facets to consider. So the first one would be that a stronger brand naturally is going to mean that you have exposure in other areas away from relying on just Google. I
Mm-hmm.
think anyone that knows me has known for quite a long time I have a very strong stance against Google, not in necessarily a negative way, but I've seen Google go from what it was, you know, a kind, friendly brand that was clear and uncluttered, to a corporate giant that now obviously is doing a lot of damage to the creator community. And I think the monopolism that they've ran has made it so that there's not been enough diversity in other forms of search. So I think when we think about that, brand can semi-compensate for that in some way. If a brand is strong, it's more likely to, appear obviously in other areas of the web. And I think brand strength obviously will improve the probability of being cited. So the stronger the brand, the more likely it is to have naturally things like stronger links, more link presence, more mentions in UGC, and ultimately, I think stronger brands are also going to have a better chance of compensating for traffic loss from organic and diversifying from other traffic sources.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you the rest of you guys kind of generally agree with that? Like, it is definitely becoming more important.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. 100% agree.
Okay. Well, we've
I'd,
got. Oh, go
I'd
on.
like to. I'd like to put a counterpoint in, if I may. No, I'm not disagreeing. Although it's much more fun if we disagree.
You
So,
can. It's totally
and
fine.
I don't feel I've got a problem if I disagree with Daniel, because we'll go to the pub and drink it out because we live
Oh yeah,
about 500 yards from each other, maybe a bit more than that. But I think that, of course, everything that has been said is true. But I think there's still a little bit of truth in the fact that, you know, once you're in the LLMs, you're in the LLMs, and that isn't necessarily a function of size. You've got more probability of getting in there if you're bigger, for sure, but it's much more about the accuracy of your context. I think is going to increase your chances of getting seen in the right place at the right time. And I think you've got a question coming up about it later on, so I won't go too much into the Carrie Rose one, but I know that.
Well, you can. You totally
Yeah,
can
okay.
now. I mean,
So
you
so
know,
you
what
said
is
before that you were
more
going to bring up
important?
Carrie Rose mentioned that Red Bull was not doing so well in a particular context. Funnily
Yeah.
enough, I hadn't seen that, but I also said the same thing at a talk last week, in that, and I hadn't got a physical example from Red Bull, but I said that one of the interesting things about just getting your brand bigger is that it used to be Red Bull did a brilliant. I think we can all agree that Red Bull's marketing over the last 10 years has been phenomenal.
Hmm.
They've jumped out of balloons in space. They've got, go soapboxes on television programs and go-karts and good as well. But what it has done is it's talks to its audiences rather than talked about the product itself. So
Hmm.
now an LLM has the opportunity to hallucinate and misunderstand what it's about. So I wouldn't suggest that they should have done anything different. I think that moving forward, though, saying what you don't do for a brand is almost as important as saying what you do if you want the LLMs to properly understand what you're doing. That's my counterpoint.
I'd love to chime in here as well. So I think what's really interesting, and I won't go too far into it, but I'm now on week 8. So I've actually been studying and learning LLMs. I've been learning about GPTs. I've been learning about transformers, because I think one important thing is, like, it's easy to know how a car goes along. It has an engine in it, it has wheels. But if you truly start to understand the mechanics of the principles behind these things and how they work, then you may have a better fundamental understanding of what's really going on below the scenes. So if we take one thing, for example, for however long, we know that a big part of SEO has always relied on link building, because ultimately, like the whole principle of trust, it's a voting mechanism. And it's also the thing that Google needed to keep incentivized, because Google could only grow its index by what it could find crawling the web. So if you incentivize link building, you create more and more avenues for Googlebot to discover new content. But I think when we start thinking about LLMs and the fact that, they're trained and trained and trained, and then, that training allows them to have a larger and larger database of sources, as well as places that they can go and retrieve information from, I think then the model begins to change. So we're talking about like link building, but then when we're talking about, appearing in LLMs, for example, one of the things that I was learning about was vectoring, and it was learning about how words are converted into numbers, and those numbers basically mean that I'm really sorry, someone's knocking on my door.
Oh,
It basically means that, like with vectors, you have like similarity between words, which LLM, infer. And I think the way that things are going, like, with brands, how does an LLM know a brand's authority?
yeah.
What cements that brand as more of a go-to brand? Is it the quality of the information? Is it citations? What are these things? And I think this is the kind of stuff at the minute that we're figuring out. And
Yeah.
obviously I've yet to play with WayK, but I think that goes some way to really knowing, what AI understands about your brand.
Well, maybe we can just actually just address that directly here. Like, what do we? And I've seen a bunch of studies, myself. Like, there's definitely this kind of research is coming out now. But what do we actually know about what it takes for a brand to appear in an AI search result? Whether that be the different LLMs, because I know they all prefer slightly different things, or an AI overview slash AI mode. What can you guys tell us about that?
Um,
Chima, do
Anything?
you want to go?
first? I was going to say, I'll put mine really quickly. So first of all, there's two key things. So number one, there's the pre-trained information that LLM has. So, if it's like a long established brand where that brand's been cited in loads of sources across the web, during that training, if there's sufficient information for the brand, it may recall that. Whereas if, there's something about the brand, or a brand search with a variant, i.e. like a brand and the product, and that isn't part of the training data, then obviously an LLM may use retrieval augmentation generation to get
Mm-hmm.
that information. So I think that's it. And I think if we talk about like Google AI mode or AIOs or LLMs, they all are operating quite differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the way to like have a presence, or to understand, how you could improve your visibility in those, I think each of those are going to have their own conditions, like with AI mode and the query fan out technique and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go Chima.
So, what we know, at least if I remove AI mode from that equation, we know they like no, we know they like brands. We know they like recognizable brands. We know they like brands that people have a positive experience with, because they can interpret that by how people talk about your brand online on places like Reddit and things like that. So they're able to get that information. And we also know that they like links. They like sites that have, in fact, there's a Ziv Davis study that showed that they reference brands that have high brand authority and high domain authority. So all of this under it is still driven by links and mentions.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that they like those two things. And we also know that they like recent content that is written by people who are thought leaders, first person, UGC, all that stuff. But what I find interesting is that it feels in a way like it's the same metrics that we're using to measure traditional SEO that
Mm-hmm.
is also being used to measure what is showing up in AI search.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's trying to figure out the difference between. There are very subtle, and some people say they're the same, and some people say they're not the same.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
would say the difference in a way is that there's a bigger emphasis on how people talk about you in the same way about how you talk about yourself. So a lot of the content that shows up on Google is content that is written by brands for themselves. So in a way, you can actually, I don't want to use the word manipulate, I want to say control. You can control what Google says about you with what you put out on your website. Brands like
mm-hmm.
HubSpot, all the big brands that we use as examples for good content marketing, it's from their websites, right? But a lot of the time when I'm looking for marketing resources and things like that on ChatGPT, the kind of stuff I'm seeing is from community. I didn't even know HubSpot had a community, but that is the stuff that I see getting cited more in ChatGPT versus content from HubSpot itself. It's the same with when I'm seeing all this other community-based content. I'm seeing content written by people who are reviewing tools. I'm seeing um, like an aggregation of will I say an aggregation of sentiments. That is what I'm looking for. An aggregation of sentiments from review tools about how people talk about a tool when it's looking for what to recommend. These are things that, in a way, they show up for local SEO, but it is more reinforced when I'm looking for recommendations or when I'm looking at content that is being will I say attributed from ChatGPT. And I say ChatGPT because that is the one I use primarily, so I can't speak to the other ones.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, everybody kind of at this point has mentioned how important authority is and brand. So, how the hell are small brand marketers supposed to keep up, stand a
Yeah,
chance in this landscape?
yeah. So that's the thing. I think I made a post about this on LinkedIn yesterday because I was so pissed off. I was
Yes, you
I was
did.
pissed off. Yeah, I was pissed off because there's a lot of thought leaders talking about how to optimize for AI mode. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about how to optimize for AI mode? It's a new experimental thing. What have you done to be releasing anything about optimizing for it? Because how many people have even tested it, to start giving us anything about optimizing? And it feels very generic. There's a danger to that kind of generic advice that makes everybody think that they can go and do this thing in this checklist and they're going to show up in AI mode. I have read that patent. We have a post coming out on the Moz blog tomorrow, written by somebody around that patent. I'm sorry, but I really don't think that small websites should be too focused on showing up in AI mode. Number one, why are you trying to show up in a platform that is basically stealing your content, that is basically trying to keep people inside their ecosystem and not send traffic back to you? You're a small website. You need all the traffic you can get because you need sales more than visibility. So instead, I would say you would have better opportunity on platforms like, depending on what you sell, on platforms like TikTok, on maybe even Instagram. Social media would be a good place to start. Paid ads right now. I never thought I would be the person saying this, but I think you would have better ROI starting with paid ads to get revenue using social media to build your audience. I want to say nurturing communities, but as a small business, you probably don't even have the budget for a community manager or any of those things. But you can also nurture community with social. SEO is something you do because you want to have a good website. You want to have all of that in place. You want to have content that people see that helps them make a purchasing decision. But you should not be prioritizing AI search. You should not even be prioritizing SEO right now if you're a small business. You should be prioritizing the channels that allow you to reach your audience right now. And then SEO becomes a longer term play.
I think
And I
I'd
can't believe I'm
jump.
saying this, honestly.
I think I'd jump in and say it's a bit of a perfect storm here because uh, the point that you make about AI mode and optimizing it for it, I agree with that. I think it's a double-edged sword because I think ultimately businesses that just don't want to put the effort in, because let's face it, the chance of getting a click is significantly lower, as we've seen with CTR dropping off a cliff. So what do these businesses do? They turn to paid. So not only does Google keep more people in its ecosystem, it will drive up revenue because people aren't getting the level of traffic. And obviously, I think this is one of the reasons why, it's like never ever badmouth the hand that feeds you. Like Google has been my platform that has given me the chance to earn my living. But I think the fact is that,
and you badmouth them every day.
I do now. I do now because, for me, like, I've seen the damage it's done. I've had people come and book an audit after HCU, which was like the biggest barefaced load of rubbish and lies. Google lied. They absolutely lied. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing, and they let that go. And all the people that did everything that Google banged on about with EAT, making your content people first, blah, 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 even though AI mode is just a rehash of everyone else's content. They're doing the very thing that they put in their spam guidelines not to do. And I think the thing is that this whole ecosystem now is rotten. Like, the fact is that it's now really about, okay, what is damage limitation? So stronger brand, broader marketing effort, obviously that being PPC, which is obviously still another side of the evil coin. But in terms of compensating, it's okay, well, we get less traffic, so better to convert more of the traffic that you got. So CRO should be more of a priority as well, even for small businesses, just making sure that you're converting as much of the traffic as you get. And I think while we are losing traffic, informational traffic is obviously going to be the first to get hit. I still think there is still opportunity in commercial transactional stuff, but I do see that once AI mode is fully rolled out around the world and people adopt it more and more, then we'll start to see more decay. So it's a bit of a funny time at the minute.
I think we have to, as SEOs, look at AI mode differently to the way that we have been. And I think that the narrative that we've given ourselves, we may have been a little blinkered on how to make, I'm going to say, money out of AI mode. I think the behind me, I can see there's a glowing computer behind me, which I bought about 3-4 weeks ago. And I in order to buy it, it's got self-hosting LLMs on it, and so I'm doing what Daniel's doing. I'm going on an 8-week course and trying to learn all this stuff, and I'm trying to host NAN on my own machine with my own versions of LLM. And I knew, because I tried to buy a $200 computer, it didn't work. I knew I had to buy a big computer to do this properly. So I researched using, let's say, Gemini Deep Research to analyze the right machine. I then went and used another LLM to say, what's the website, what's the product on Amazon that's closest in match to this spec that they've come out with from ChatGPT. I then used another from Gemini. I then used another LLM to check the spec that the Amazon guy was trying to sell me and say, can you get a better spec for an LLM hosting machine than this one? And so I was doing all these things to analyze everything. It was only after I'd spent £2,000 on a computer on Amazon that I realized that I bought from a brand I'd never heard of, a website I'd never been to, and the computer itself had no reviews because nobody had bought that specific computer. It works. It's fine, by the way. It's great. It's great for the job. But the point was that all of the research had been done through AI overviews, LLMs, ChatGPT, or whatever. It had done that research for me. Yes, the content had been read, but not by me, by the LLM, and had been interpreted by the LLMs. So my point is that content now has to talk to the LLMs as much as it does to a human being, and the human being may never go to the website to get the sale. Doesn't mean to say that SEO or a version of SEO isn't important. What I'm saying is that we have to look at things differently. It's not about the click at all anymore.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because so James Cadwallader, again, probably butchered his surname, was speaking at SEO Week about the rise of the agentic internet. So it's exactly what you described. So users aren't even going on the internet anymore. The AI agents are doing it on their behalf. So from this world of user experience that we have been living in, now potentially it becomes all about agent experience. And as we've kind of been finding out and discussing, like there are certain things that make website content more easily accessible to agents. What is it to AI? How are you guys, like, what is the future of the internet gonna be, do you reckon? Like, what websites, what are they gonna look like?
I'm imagining that Chima's going to have to get very annoyed about the way she has to structure a story. Because I bet that's what's going to happen. Because they like chunks of simple.
No, no,
No?
no,
No?
no.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not saying you
No.
like it. Yeah.
Why are we making their job easier? That's my own. Why this? You said the thing with SEO. I think I said this in my article where I wrote about should we stop creating informational content, and is that the moment we start to write for an LLM, we've lost the plot already. The moment we start to write for summarization, we start to write for content to be picked up by a machine, we've lost the plot, because that is how we got to where we are now. AI mode is a response to poor user experience with search. We have to understand that as the underlying base. We are still thinking like SEOs. We need to start thinking like the users. And for me,
I so want to agree with you, Chima. I so
nobody
want to
is
agree
ready
with
to
you.
make
but I
yet. And I
can't.
think it comes from a place of fear. Nobody's ready to make that shift yet. We're still thinking about optimization. Dixon's brain is literally an optimized brain.
Can I say I'm loving this? I don't think we've ever had such a like hectic debate on like so many
You need it.
disagreements.
You need it. I mean,
Well,
we're all it. This is the thing. This is new territory, and if we're
Yeah.
all going to come in with the same thing, we've got
Yeah.
nothing. You know,
Yeah.
will
we've got,
someone
you know, I think it's important to have different opinions, especially at this particular juncture, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not going to make headway as a
Yes, sir.
SEO
Yeah.
community if we don't learn new rules, new paradigms to work with, and that requires debate. And if you're not scared, you know, and great. I've got 3 people that I know I can have a debate with here, which is great.
You have.
will
Go on.
someone think of the link builders? No one here is thinking of the link builders.
I've
What
got
are the link?
something for them. I've got a scrap for them. So for me, what is interesting is that in all those LLM responses, because we're kind of tracking it in Wake, the citations then become very interesting. So we kind of see what citations all the LLM uses, and I know Crystal Carter from Wix will back me up on this. Some of the citations are pants. It's like the listicles of 2010.
Yeah.
You know, some of the citations that are coming out of the chat GPTs of this world are poor, shall we say. However,
Because
if
people
you
are gaming
start
it
doing
now,
that with
that's why.
your competitors and seeing what citations are coming back from your competitors, so you say, what is the best computer for an LLM? And a whole bunch of websites come back with, you know, the top 10 PC world, you know, computers for LLMs or whatever. And you got all those. Now, when your competitors start getting, you say, what is the best Hewlett Packard computer and your Dell, then you can go and see where they kind of get mentioned and stuff, and then you can start going and getting yourself cited on those, because it's not about the link anymore, but it sure as hell is about having your brand mentioned in the place where the LLM looks.
Yeah.
Are we going to see a new era of EMBs, exact match brands?
I doubt it.
Oh.
I doubt it, because an exact match brand, it becomes using words instead of. So Rand went on to Spark Toro. You know, he used a word that was completely made up. Wake is completely made up. You know, I've got words that are made up. They seem to be able to get hooked into LLMs better than majestic or inlinks, which are words that can have other meanings. So so I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with Dixon on this, because if AI mode is looking at meaning and not the exact words, then exact match brands are not going to work. But also, to your point on citations, I think I read a post from somebody last week or 2 weeks ago that people have started gaming mentions in a way that will get them cited on LLMs. Basically, the same stuff we're doing with SEO and black hats, or they said we should not use black hat anymore. What's the inclusive term? I don't know. And that hat from 10 years ago or whatever it was. That's part of what we're seeing now, with everybody basically doing copycats.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to that, but it's a problem.
Okay. I need to. We've gone so off piste. I'm not sure
Sorry.
where the mountain is anymore, which is fine. It's
So I
totally
can head to
fine.
the beach.
Yeah, we're all heading to the beach. That's fine. I'm just gonna. What I want to try and do.
Oh, there's
is,
loads of questions in the Q&A as well.
I know. Oh, bloody hell! All right. So I know that I want to try and leave the wonderful people that have come into this webinar with some practical, tactics, potentially, like, concrete things that they can try and do. Maybe we're going to just potentially well, I don't want to open up the debate about small businesses again, what they should be doing. Maybe just fuck off to social. I don't know, but let's just think about what new tactics marketers can adopt to increase kind of that direct engagement with the customer, if indeed the user, if indeed they can.
I can go first with this. So there was something that somebody talked about last night at our sip and search event, and she gave an example of how Nike, all their ads, if you look at Nike ads, is always that underdog that came to the top. That's Nike's story. Is baked into everything that they do. The ad with Serena Williams, the ad with, I've forgotten her name, but the athletes who does gymnastic, all their ads, if you notice it, that is baked into their story. I personally give an example of Brighton SEO and how the Brighton SEO story is from a room above a pub. Everything Brighton SEO does, that text is baked in there. The Red Bull you gave is baked into my brain. Red Bull gives you wing. Every time I drink a Red Bull, when I still used to drink energy drink, I used to literally feel like I could fly because they had baked that into their story. So if you're a brand and you're trying to get more attention, more visibility, start by identifying your brand story in a few words. If you think about the underlying thing, that is your backstory, that is your underdog story, that if people hear that, it's going to make them feel affinity with you. Identify that and use that in your messaging till thy kingdom come. That's the first step. Number two, start getting your internal SMEs outside. I give an example of Gong all the time. They do this so well. I discovered Gong through Udi Ledego. I did not know what Gong was until I started seeing Udi's content on my feed. And then there was somebody Reed, who also worked at Gong, and then they had a couple of more people. Href is another good example. I know I work at Moz, but Href does a good job of bringing out their internal space to be thought leaders on LinkedIn. And that gives them a lot of visibility.
Right.
If you have internal SMEs, get them outside. Partner with communities as affiliates. Communities tend to be very, very engaged, especially communities like Women in Tech or communities that are on LinkedIn. Find the communities that are very, very active and then build partnerships with them. Sometimes those partnerships don't even have to cost a penny. If there is value and if it feels authentic, people will still engage with that. And then if you have the budget, get on affiliates. Affiliates are great for driving demand. And I say this because because we've used affiliate and we are seeing the revenue from that. Affiliates will drive demand, affiliates will give you brand mention, and affiliates will show trust in a way that allows people to see the outcomes, which is what you want for your products. So if I could say a few things that brands should be doing to get started with, that would be like the trajectory to move forward in.
Okay. All right.
My
Go, Daniel.
So I was gonna give my 2 cents on things that could be done
Yeah,
or what I
please
would
do.
advocate. Okay, so I think for anyone that I speak to now in regards to SEO, I think panicking and looking around at all of the stuff going around on social media is probably the worst thing to do at the minute. We all know, as Chima said, you've got all these people that are out there peddling crap about how to dominate AIOs and dominate AI mode, and they've got no clue. They're just riding a bandwagon and using complex terminology. But the one thing that I would absolutely say is to go and set a couple of hours aside each evening, like I've been doing, learn how GPTs and LLMs actually work. If I could refer, there's something called Free Blue, One Brown. So it's the number 3 blue, 1 brown. He's got loads of YouTube videos and he explains everything from the ground up in terms of how GPTs work, how context work, how vectoring works. When you watch the videos and then you learn the concepts, then it becomes a lot easier to understand what's happening when you're running a question search on ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity. So the more you really understand the fundamentals, the more you can actually start thinking about how those fundamentals apply to your content. And one of the things that really did it for me was I was watching about how vectoring works. So go and watch 3 Blue, 1 Brown. He has a video on vectoring, and it basically explains like words are given numbers and they're grouped together and how relevant they are. And then it explained the example of context. So, for example, if you had the word queen in an area with words around it, you would think like queen, king, bishop, pawn, or you could have queen, the band, and basically explain like how LLMs have to work out context from one word to the next. And then once you start understanding really how these things are actually working and generating the information, the better you're going to have an idea of the kind of concepts of how you can actually, make your content so that it's more likely to be cited. One thing that I think is really important here is that LLMs initially, like the early versions of GPT, GPT-3 onwards, they were trained on information off the web. And that, if you remember, like in the early days of ChatGPT, and you asked it a question, it would give you an answer, but it would be like that answer was out of date.
Yeah, from
Then
2 years ago or something.
Yeah, then retrieval augmented generative RAG came out. I always
Yeah.
get my tongue tied, where all of a sudden it can go out onto the web, get fresh information back, and then obviously it runs its process vectoring. It looks at everything goes through like transformers, and then it can work out, okay, these things are most relevant. So fundamentally learning all of the mechanics underneath are going to make the onward journey for, okay, so what do we need to do? How do we maybe better structure our content? So for example, creating shorter forms of passage content with context. The other thing I would say as well is that brand popularity could be a thing. We know like ChatGPT leans on Bing, for example. Indirectly, Bing might lean on links the same way that Google does, obviously to a different degree. So links remain important, but links might not necessarily be the thing that's influencing citation in LLM. So my point is always learn. And if you see people peddling like, oh, this is how you rank and this is how you dominate AI mode, when even experienced people in the industry are still learning, don't get lost in the noise.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fair. Dixon, go.
I
What
absolutely
are your
agree with everything Daniel said, and I don't want to repeat any of it but Waycake does a lot of that, turning content into entities, so that we can then do that vector matching and things. And so one way that you can do that without using something like Waycake, though, is what you can do is to find content gaps that the LLMs need to get hold of to give you that edge, is to say, let's say you are Dell and or Nike, Nike and Reebok, then what you could do is you can go to, if you're Nike, you can go to an LLM and say, why would somebody buy a Reebok sneaker instead of myself, a Nike one? And that's an interesting prompt because it's sharing. The LLM is, if it's going to not hallucinate, is going to come out with the things that Nike is not doing. It's coming out with the effectively the content gaps or the feature gaps. So that's the underlying principle of how we're kind of approaching it. So I've got to put a link in the comments for those that are there to an action plan that kind of does it for the concept of sneakers and how Nike might do some things differently. But it's all about finding out what's unique about your competitors and shouldn't be. You know, the things that your competitors are getting noticed for in LLMs that you aren't is where you'll get your context. And then the other part of that is making sure that you're crystal clear about what you do offer. If you're a barber in Lincolnshire, UK, then don't pretend that you can cut hair in New York. And don't pretend you can cut mine, because look what somebody's done to mine.
So that's really interesting, because that's like, you know, it's becoming more and more and more and more important. Like, even if you don't prioritize, you know, even if you don't put all of your eggs in the AI basket, as it were, it's still really important to monitor how your brand is being cited and perceived and retrieved, etc., etc. So, I mean, I imagine that there's probably already been numerous, I'm sure Lily Ray's had these situations, but like, what happens what can brands do if they find that AI is misrepresenting their products or
He's
values
doing
or
it all the time. So there's an agency in on the West Coast, Los Angeles, Hennessy Digital, and he owns Hennessy.com with an EY. And
yeah.
I put him through the system through the system, and it said he was two things. Firstly, he was a cognac, which is Hennessy without the E, and then also a parts a auto parts company, because there's another brand in Los Angeles that's an auto parts company. And back in the day, Jason Hennessy went to that company and said, hey, give me a link from your website saying, are you looking for the SEO company? Go here. Brilliant idea at the time. Now it just says SEO company on an auto parts website. So this is the kind of problem that does change as the world changes. So if you've got generic words, that happens quite a lot. So fact checking is job number one. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to check the facts and then track it back to the errant page on the website that caused the problem. And it may not be it may be the LLM that caused the problem, but you know, you should be able to try and get yourself back to the source and fix it.
That's really, really interesting. He wrote an article for us, actually.
So Jason, he did give me permission to talk about this publicly, by the way. The guy, I'm not outing him. He thinks it's brilliant as well. It's a really interesting find. We had another one with Inlinks. So Inlinks apparently got bought by SEMrush. That wasn't true either. You know. Oh no. Well, that wasn't the hallucination. It said it was a rank checking company, and we don't rank check, and we've pulled that back to a broadly positive review of Inlinks, but it added this feature that we didn't do. So we could, in that case, we could reach out to them, and they were immediately, you know, fixed it, and we haven't heard about it in the LLMs again. Things are not always that easy to fix, but you know, another thing I found interesting: Microsoft blocks Gemini altogether. It doesn't stop the LLMs from saying, "What do you know about Microsoft Azure or whatever it may be?" It's just that they're losing control of their narrative, in my opinion, if they do that.
The LLM is never going to turn around and say,
I don't know.
They've blocked
Never heard
us,
of Microsoft.
so we're not sure. Can't tell you anything. Yeah. Go on, Daniel.
Oh, sorry. I was like on a different track there. I was going to say the other thing as well is that for every positive thing that happens in this world, something negative has to come along with it. And unfortunately, I think we're also going to see the opportunity for people to manipulate and influence LLMs negatively. There has to be breaks on things somewhere, but with the automations that exist out there, it's not hard now for people to distribute content that might be negative or misleading of the brand, ultimately like poisoning.
True.
So I think that's going to be, because, you know, we've seen it where, you know, we had years of negative SEO until Google finally got to the point where it would just ignore link spam. I think now they're going to have the challenges, you know, the gatekeepers to all this data. And one other thing I think is also interesting, I don't want to chuck too much in here, but have we also thought about personalization? Because I think
In what respects?
memory, because obviously,
Yes. Oh my God. Oh
Oh,
my God.
yes.
Yes.
yes,
Okay, that's probably a
Persistent,
whole other webinar.
yeah, persistent memory in AI mode.
yeah. Well, we're gonna have, the thing is that there's with like Chat GPT now has stored memory, so even if I go on and start a new conversation, if I've
Remember?
asked it
Yeah.
something that I've had some similar conversation with it in the past, it recalls that and it influences the outcome, and I've already seen that happen. So
Yeah.
that is also going to shape uh forward strategies in a way, like what
As we're building tools, I think that this is going to make us have to use, well, so the API generally doesn't have that long term, short term. It's called LTSM, long term, short term memory, and so you then get an unbiased pool of data using the API, or I think you do. But yeah, it is a problem, of course. Individuals create their own echo chamber in
Yeah.
in ChatGPT now.
So, guys, this is great, but we've got so many questions, as you pointed out, from the attendees to go through. So, if you don't mind, we might switch to that now.
Mhm.
If my glamorous assistant Patrice could pick one, here we are. So, we've seen a tremendous decrease in clicks with AI. My thought was to transition from writing from informational intent keywords to commercial keywords. Is this the right move?
I
so
literally asked. Okay, yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
okay. So I hate to I hate to spoil the party here, but obviously SEO Stack has over 100 million keywords growing now, and in March, on the March update, we saw AIO prominence significantly increase, and it was literally spreading across commercial and navigational queries. So whereas we had the initial two-phase rollout of AIOs last year, the impact of them was progressive, but then on the core updates, they've significantly increased the prominence of AIOs across commercial and navigational and even transactional queries. I've seen them now. And not only
Yep.
that, they're unstable. So they appear in some searches one day and then they don't appear again the next.
Yep.
So it's almost like nothing is safe from it. I think what I would give in terms of advice is something called compensatory strategy. So what I mean by that is if it took one well put together article to generate 100 clicks, you're now going to need 10 well put together articles, you know, just using this as an example. And obviously each article requires significantly more effort now because of what's happening with Google's indexing policies. So whether or not you're deterred or put off, you should still make a concerted effort to keep creating that content, even though you don't get the same level of reward.
Yep. I just dropped that link in the comment section that I have content that literally answers that question. And basically, yes, you should still be creating informational content because you don't want to just keep jumping strategies, tweaking strategies every time there's something new happening. Your SEO and content strategy should be resilient, should be future forward, and if you just keep jumping every time there's something new, you're never actually going to see any sustainable growth. So, seconding what Daniel said, you should still be creating informational content. Read that article. It shares how you can do that and get hopefully some better results.
Awesome.
I'll say follow the money. You write about what it is that's going to make you money. If
Product.
you're flying, if you're selling flights from New York to Paris, then that's what you talk about, because Google will never actually be able to fly you from New York to Paris. Okay, that's
Mm.
the truth of it. You sell, you talk about the thing you can sell. You can talk around that subject for sure, but if you are just talking about information, yeah, I'm afraid the ship has sailed. There's already a lot of books in the British Library, and Google's already scanned them all.
All right. So, what metrics / tracking are necessary to get a good overview of brand visibility now? I'm newer to brand visibility and I want a way to communicate its value with supporting metrics to clients.
I want to
Yeah.
say for me, priority would be referral traffic because that is the direct indicator of what is coming from all that visibility outside of organic. So, number one for me, referral traffic.
So Wayco's doing it differently. So what we're doing is we've given up on the click altogether. We don't care about clicks anymore, or traffic anymore. For brand visibility, what we're thinking is, and we're launching this thing tomorrow. It was supposed to come out today, so it isn't. But anyway, so our brand visibility tracker will say, you put in the prompts. So what is the best site for sneakers? What is the best site for, whatever your prompts are? It'll then track every day or every other day on the engines that you want, see what brands are mentioned, and start to track the visibility of those brands. So what are the best sneakers, and Nike, Reebok, whatever it may come out with. That's our solution is track the prompts and then see the brands in the prompts, and we think that's going to work pretty well.
I'd say tracking brand visibility, the answer to that from my perspective would be, are you tracking your own brand visibility, or are you trying to gauge external brand visibility? So for internal brand visibility, I'd still be tracking impressions in GSC. So I'd be looking at the volume of search. I'd be looking at external stuff such as Google Trends to look at brand demand. I'd also be looking at offshoots of brand mentions. So some of the things could be looking in link tools. Obviously, you've got Moz Ahrefs where you can look at keyword data. The other thing I also typically tend to do is I use the in-text command in Google. So I use in-text : then I put the brand name. Then I use the tools in Google search. So you can use like in-text, the brand name, and then you can set using the tools the mentions in the last 24 hours, 48 hours. And the good thing there is that you can actually look at how many results are returned. And I actually did write a script in using Puppeteer that would do this. Obviously, I'm not saying that this is something that everyone can do, but just using the in-text command and looking at like frequency results is actually good to see if you're popping up in new places, like in UGC communities. So I would typically tend to say brand visibility is a bit more of a fragmented thing. And then lastly, obviously, you've got LLM tracking. I think some people use something like Profound, which I've not used it personally. It does look quite expensive, but I'm not going to comment on that. But there are going to be ways that you can track brand visibility, using LLM trackers. One thing I would say there, just before I finish up, because I always make answers far too long, is that, and I think Mark Williams Cook pointed this out, is that tracking mentions in LLMs isn't always efficient because LLMs are so inconsistent. So you could be querying LLMs for a position that you get, but then if another 100 people search for the same thing, they've got personalization, they're going to get all different things. So it's a bit of a difficult one.
Mm-hmm. All right. With there being many similarities in the tactics you use to optimize for SEO and LLM traffic, how do you position this to clients and businesses? How do you differentiate your packages and outputs? Is it prudent to measure both channels together? That's a good question. Who wants to eat that one?
I'm happy to. I know I talked a bit too much. So in terms of like LLM SEO, AI SEO, Geo, like I don't know how many acronyms are being thrown around now. I think some people were enjoying it, some people were just getting fed up with it. First of all, sorry, can I see the question again? Sorry, because it was like more than one question.
Patrick.
So I mean, in terms of like tactics, I think they just naturally share some of the same tactics. Like LLMs can't at this point render JavaScript, so you need to make sure that your content output is readable to them for RAG. But how do you position this to clients and businesses? Well, I think one of the really important things here, and this is why the industry is being polluted at the minute, because like the new shiny object that now clients are like, we want to be in AI search. What do we do? Well, the SEO community, a lot of it thrived on client ignorance, not to put the industry down, but there's been a huge volume of client ignorance or lack of knowledge. I don't want to put it in like a unfair way, but if people don't understand something, they're easy to prey on. And obviously there's people out there who want to make money and they don't care about integrity or ethics. The reality is that if you know you have a good running relationship with clients, you just explain to them how it is. You know, we are learning about factors that influence LLM visibility, but right now, you know, we can't say categorically that doing ABC is going to lead to that visibility. You know, we will adhere to best practice, so we'll do all the things that we know from a logic point of view make sense. You know, we'll strengthen brand, we'll look at brand mentions, you know, brand salience and sentiment, you know, searches and things for the brand positive. You do all the things that are common sense that would benefit SEO and likely have some form of benefit to LLM visibility, and educate the client. You know, don't say to the client, here's an LLM SEO package, make it look like something unique is being done when really it isn't. And that would be the way I'd position it.
Have we got time for one more?
I was trying to answer that one and saying that I think you should measure them differently. And the reason I say that, one of the reasons I say that, is that if you're an agency, it gives you a new product to sell. Great, that's something else. Don't sell that same. Just like don't sell something new. But also, we're doing searches on our phones. Oh, this app has DALL-E, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, loads of things all in one app. I'm using an app. I'm not using the phone. It's a third-party tool. So I'm not even. I'm tracking it in a different way. So I think it's still all cool. I'd still call it SEO, but there's SEO in the same way that there's SEO for Facebook and SEO for YouTube and SEO for whatever. There's SEO for LLMs. Each one of those LLMs. This is great. We've been wanting for such a long time Google not to have a monopoly. Now we've got a splintered operation where everybody's searching different things on different places. We should be rejoicing, guys. We should be rejoicing as in the industry instead of lamenting the loss of clicks.
Okay. I was going to say on that note, no. The one thing a marketer must master within the next 6 months. Oh, hi, Angie.
Oh, this is a good one. I think I would say what Daniel said earlier, which is, first of all, understand how these LLMs and how all these programs work. A lot of them are open source. Like, you can literally go online and read the patents or the updates on how they work, and maybe use note. I don't even want to say use notebook LLM, because you miss a lot of information. Read it word for word. If you have to do it slowly, 1 hour every day, read those patents, and maybe then use an LLM to understand what it means for SEO. That's a good starting point. A lot of the things they are telling us to learn, relevance engineering, a lot of other stuff. If you're learning all these things and you don't even understand how the tool works fundamentally, you already have a problem. So I think first and foremost, the first thing we need to know, understand how they work and how they impact search as we know it right now.
Okay. It is 5 o'clock, guys. So we're gonna have to say goodbye. That's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for joining and for all of your awesome questions. Huge thanks to Daniel, Chima, and Dixon for giving up your time and expertise today. You guys are all amazing. This was possibly the best one ever, in my humble opinion. We'll be emailing out the recording tomorrow to everyone who registered. If you missed the start, do not worry, you can catch up. Next month's webinar is going to be an extra special workshop with Lily Grozeva on AI search auditing. So, her process for how you can actually audit for all of this kind of stuff that we've been talking about today. Make sure you sign up for that one. The link is maybe going into the chat right now. Thank you again for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you, Jojo. Bye
Bye,
bye.
guys. Thanks, Chima.
Bye.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks,
Thank
Jojo.
you. Thanks, everyone.